Now, Mark sort of stole my opening gambit, which is usually, who knows the zone? There's actually too many geeks here, not that many people interested in sports, I guess. So it's quite interesting, though. Over the time, I mean, 1 year back or so, nobody raised his hand, okay? And now people do, which is great. So what we are trying to do here is taking people from here, so watching sports, sitting in front of an old television in a group and sort of having a shared experience and taking this content, which is immensely valuable. If you look at this here, we have about 38 billion a year in the sports market, whereas around 19 billion, half of it in the music market, which you wouldn't think necessarily. And this is mostly around sports, right? And it shows that this content is immensely valuable and it isn't actually being exploited. At the same time, things are changing. So if you look at this is on the top the daily minutes being viewed per person per age on television. Now if you look at kids, 16-24, my daughters, that used to be 169 minutes, now it's 85. With my daughters, they don't actually watch television. They just have sort of their pad, they have their mobile, and that's that. Doesn't matter to them. Same time, mobile is obviously a massive amount of viewership. If you look at the ESPN subscriber numbers, they have been going down quite a lot. So lost 3 million subscribers over the last 2 years. And Netflix in the US is by now has surpassed the standard cable subscribers on their own. All the cable subscribers together are less than the Netflix subscribers in the US. So it's a step change. Obviously, everything else follows along. I don't want to bore you with all the details, but suffice to say that if you look at advertisement here, and probably the guys here at Telegraph can sort of sing of that choir sheet, TV is going down, print is going down, digital is going up. Why is that? Because people actually move into digital. So we looked at that because we were a Perform Group, we were trading in sports content, and we said, there is an opportunity here. We can actually go out and create an OTT sports service. We have rights, we have websites for the marketing, we have the knowledge to work with this content to get it on the web. Why don't we do that? What we said is there is this opportunity to do what Netflix did for static content, linear VOD content, for live content. And the way to do that is a bit Netflixy. Be accessible, go again, fans first, customers first, show it where people want to see it, make it affordable, take a Netflix-style model, don't go like the major pay TVs offers where you pay sort of north of 100 quid a month oftentimes, and make this something which is, what we always say, the price of 2 beers. Okay, that's affordable for everybody and for every sports fan. And make it flexible. So don't lock everybody into a 48 months, 24 months contract. Go out and make this something which you can cancel anytime when you want to do that. And that's only the one side of the coin. The flip side of the coin is this. You need to make it something which is interesting for the rights holder. Because why would they go away from Sky, let's say, or BT in this country, and give us the rights when they get a ton of money from these guys? So the first thing we need to do, we need to pay similar fees, which makes it a pretty expensive proposition. We need to have an open commercial model, which sort of these guys which you see there have shown. There's a slight difference there, of course, so that the rights holder can come in, sees the advantage of the business model, and wants his content there. And obviously, if you look at people like Netflix, it's slightly different. They have started to do their own content. For sports, that's slightly difficult because you won't actually do a new Premier League or something like that. So we can't do that. And the other thing, which is very important for the rights holders, more and more important, is that they understand what the fans are doing, what the fans want. We obviously know that much better than a television provider. A broadcaster can't generally really see what people do, how they use the product. Best thing they can do is sort of guess at the audience numbers. We know exactly what people do. Has been quite a bit of a journey so far. So we started out in 2016 in Japan and the German-speaking countries. Then actually did our own apps. We are regularly featured as the best app in the App Store by Apple on iOS. Launched in various additional markets. this year in Spain and Brazil, and 2020 we're going to expand a lot further and be, I think we already are a truly global product, but we're going to be way more global than that. Now, why could we do that? Of course, I already mentioned fan-first philosophy. We are device agnostic, very important. From our past, we have global relationships with the rights holders, which helps a lot. So we know how to buy the rights, how to talk to these people. And we build a scalable tech stack, as I said earlier. We are at the moment scalable to about 10 million concurrent users per continent where we have an installation, which is way more than we really need. But we think that in due course we will be as big as Netflix, and then we might see that. Funnily enough, we have engagement. We have, I think, way more engagement than the classical broadcasters. We see up to 90% of the people subscribed in market watching at the same time when we have a big event. There's reasons for that. I come to that a bit later on. Obviously, unlocking the power of OTT, and I mentioned it already. We know our customers, and everything which we do at the zone is data-led. So we look at what's happening, we look at how the rights perform, we look at the devices people want to watch stuff on, when they want to watch it, the way we treat our content. Is it important to have a studio? Is it important to have somebody in the ground to comment? That actually keeps our production lean, which helps a lot and makes it much cheaper than established broadcasters. So that gives us money, which we can then invest in new markets and into rights. And that apparently works, because what you see here, last year we did broadcast about 265 million hours of content watched. And that is quite a long time. If you try to sit down and watch all of this as linear, it would take you back to about the invention of the rope. It's 30,000 years. I like that. It demonstrates that a lot is going on. And we did that over last year on 25,000 events. And this year we are going to show about 30,000. And by the way, Jesus was actually born 5 before Christ. So it's not all about the on-platform experience. So while this is obviously the most important thing, we also have an off-platform. And that is important because everybody is continuously connected nowadays. People want to see and connect to their sports whenever they can, whenever they feel like it. And while live sports is one of the last real appointments to view, where people congregate in large amounts in front of a screen to watch a game at the same time, it's very important that people can also connect to the content when the live game isn't on. And what we do there is we build up to the content. We then obviously have the live event, and we have reactions afterwards. 2 of them are off-platform. I mentioned earlier that we have a pretty big web estate. So we own, for example, the biggest football or soccer website on the planet, goal.com. And we try to have a meaningful platform in all of our established markets. So we own Sporting News.com in the US, we own Spox in Germany, and we use that to drive content when the games aren't on. And that way we can reach around 150 million fans a month. That's sadly not our subscriber number yet, but that's where we want to be in the end. And I mean, obviously way bigger, 1 billion would be much nicer, but we still have to get there. But that allows us to sell subscriptions. Another thing which we're doing is a lot of original content, which we do in the run-up to box fights or games. That's a 40 days for Joshua versus Ruiz. That's a great example. Any box fans here? 2, 3? Great. So you all know that Anthony lost against Ruiz, something which nobody anticipated. Everybody thought that Ruiz would go down in the second round. That would be it, that. But instead, Joshua went down, which is obviously not what we wanted, but that's what happened. So to talk a bit more about technology, what did we learn from all of this? Behavior per country is very different. So this is viewership on living room devices, so connected televisions, versus mobile versus web. And if you look at this, you see that mobile usage, quite contrary to what you always read, is not that important, at least not for sports. People want to watch it on their big screen device. So that's quite important for us because, again, that's a measure of device penetration and where we as a business have to be. Similarly, live versus video on demand. If you look at a market like Japan, we have quite a bit of VOD. That's simply because of time zones, because a lot of the content which we have there is happening in their night. Well, you'd be surprised how many people stay awake to watch the Champions League in Japan. But otherwise, if you look at a market like the US, where we do a lot of boxing, you would think that nobody looks at VOD at all. Quite to the contrary. A third of the usage is VOD. So while content is king, and again, I'm referencing to these numbers, around 50 billion of rights spent a year, and lots and lots and lots of people, 4 billion football fans, 2.5 billion cricket fans. That's a lot of people. So content is very important. And we play to that by having a ton of rights in market. If you look at, oh God, let's take Japan. In Japan, really, if you want to watch sport, you have to watch DAZN. So pretty much every sport except for sumo is on DAZN. And sumo we can't get because that's free TV. So we need to get a meaningful portfolio of sports rights. But at the same time, distribution is queen. So we need to be on a lot of devices. So we try to be on around 95% of the devices installed in market. And that is a lot of devices. We are not Netflix yet. Netflix can just go out and have sort of their framework, their API, and tell the television manufacturer, if you want Netflix on your device, you go install that, and happy days, and you make it work. We can't do that. We have to make it work. And we have quite a few developers who are sitting there and looking at each iteration of the operating systems of the devices to get our application to run on them properly. At the same time, there is quite a few unique challenges to live streaming. So I'm always taking this quote: everybody has a plan until you get punched in the face. Mike Tyson, one of the few true things he said, I think. We went out and said, oh, this is easy. We have been doing live streaming for betting for ages and ages. What can possibly go wrong? A lot. So first and foremost, what we have is huge audience spikes. So when a game is happening, we ramp up viewership from literally nobody to a few million. And Amazon, for example, which we use for the backend, isn't built for that. They can't do that. If you don't pre-warm it, it will fall over. Latency is a big problem. I'll come to that in a moment. Connectivity is obviously also a problem. I'll talk about that as well. And CDN is a big issue for us. So spikiness, this just illustrates it. Again, if you don't pre-warm your caches, if you haven't pre-warmed your setup and Amazon, you'll fall over. Latency, really interesting one. It's sports. So people want to watch it when it happens. You could say, okay, it's happening in a ground which is 1 mile away. What do you care if you do it 25 seconds later? We went to Canada. Canada, we have the NFL rights, so we took it off television. And there is a quite vocal, small crowd who play daily fantasy, which is sort of their equivalent of betting. Now, if you increase the latency, and at that time we had a latency which is typical for OTT, of between 45 seconds and a minute, they see what's happening in their daily fantasy app way before they see it on screen. They didn't like that a lot. So we got a proper, and we're forced to put it back. Oh, I'm on video, maybe I shouldn't say that. We had to put it back on TV for a while. So that's obviously not what you want. Then connectivity. So the internet is different in countries. So for example, Italy is much, much slower than Germany. So the penetration of broadband in households is about, in the end, it's less people in Italy than in Germany. It's about half of what you have in Germany. That means you don't get the quality. That in turn means that you have an issue, especially as there is hotspots of people who are watching, where the big clubs are. And that means you need to get the video to them somehow. And what we are doing is, we are using CDNs, as pretty much probably everybody who's trying to sell video on the planet. They either use one of the established ones like Akamai Level 3 or CenturyLink nowadays, or they build their own, as Netflix did. And the problem is really that all these CDNs are talking about, oh, we are living on the edge and no problem, we are close to the customer, but in reality they are not. In reality, they're sitting in some big data centers across the country, and then they peer with the ISPs. And then obviously you have a distribution of people across these ISPs. And that forces us in a country like Italy to use 6 CDNs, which we don't really want to do because it complicates our life and increases load on the origin. It forces us to build a lot of policies to optimize for ISPs and locations on the planet, which we also don't want to do, but which we are forced to do. So we have a process around that to make that happen. And then you end up with something like this. So what you're seeing here is CIRR, so rebuffering, how much time, the percentage of time you spend in rebuffer with the threaded spinner versus bitrate. And then you see that there are people like Tim Mobile who are sitting down in the corner. You don't want them because that means that you have bad customers. They're sitting there, want to watch this area R and can't because the provider doesn't make it happen. That's specifically problematic in countries like Italy, where we have exclusivity for some content which people really, really want to watch. So we have 3 games of Serie A exclusive per weekend. That is problematic because that means you don't have all the clubs, you have some clubs. That means the audience changes weekend by weekend. They don't have the experience with broadband. And that in turn means that people who are sitting in this blob on the bottom will be really mad and will be on social media, and you'll have a problem. So this is last year. This is what we made happen until now, which is in essence talking to all the CDNs and getting them to peer better. And in Italy, we are really using up the internet. All the peering capacity which is there on Saturdays on big games. That's a problem for people who want to watch Netflix. And that is also visible if you look at sort of the quality and the bit rate over concurrency. So if you have high concurrency, you see that the bit rate drops, and that's simply because we don't have enough peering to make things happen. So what did we do about it? We invested a lot of money in the platform first and foremost. We built our own. Not our own CDN, that isn't actually where we want, but to get the scalability I spoke about earlier, you can't really buy it, you have to do it. We also build all of the apps. We think that to be nimble, quick on our feet, make changes, do the things the customers want, we need to own the source code for all the apps. And we then operate our own fiber ring around the world to be able to backhaul content. And we do a lot of big data. So if you look a bit on all the things which we do, there is way more to it than just an app and a bit of streaming. There's also all the things broadcasters need to do, from production in the stadium to backhauling the content, to localizing the content, putting graphics on it, putting the right commentary on it, and then streaming it. One of the things we did there also, as I said already, is build our own application, and that mirrors a lot of what we heard earlier. We have around 550 developers on this thing. Our team's around 5 people, and if you have to coordinate 100 teams, that's nigh impossible. So what you need to do is what we call build it, own it, support it. Give the people in the teams the freedom to create their services, roll their services, release them without being hold on other people. Now, we can't be as nimble as we like to be because there's a lot of dependencies in the back end between teams. What we have done is we have moved pretty much all of our services to microservices by now, and are in the moment and in the process of replacing the front-end components with our V2 stack. Another very important thing is we collect all the data. So every fragment which is being watched by somebody is being tagged and is being recorded in a database. Likewise, obviously, with content is being watched, how people subscribe, when they use it, the split between VOD and live, what teams they're interested in, and so on and so forth. And that allows us to get a pretty clear image of what people are doing on the service, and that again informs our decisions on what we need to do with the product to make things successful. Again, as I said earlier, We don't trust anybody to move our content around. I said earlier, we are also a rights dealer. So some content we own exclusive worldwide. For example, all of women's tennis or a lot of NBA in Asia and all kinds of things like that. So we build an infrastructure back in the Perform day, which allows us to downlink, ingest content in some place on the planet, do a mezzanine encode, put it on our network, put it around the globe in our production centers, of which we have 4, spread strategically across the different continents, do all the localization, take it back, and then finally encode it and get it out to our customers. Now, as much as of that as we can, we want to do on the cloud. So it's not good for us to own data centers or fiber, any of these things. Sort of in the core from the stadium, we can't do away with it yet. It's just not cost efficient. But on the encoding, for example, we do. That is something which we spread out over different clouds. Again, the idea being that we want to have a shared nothing approach to the critical path, which means we need to replicate as a base experience, a minimal viable product, television. So the experience of switching the thing on and you see something. Okay? All the bells and whistles and chat and data and what have you, so the personalization layer cannot work. People won't like that, but as long as they can watch the game, they are fine. And again, this is a big difference to services like Netflix. Netflix, if you can't watch it tonight, you'll probably watch it tomorrow. You know, won't be happy, but you'll probably not churn. With us, if you have the Champions League final and you can't watch it, then they don't wait for us. And tomorrow, it's not interesting anymore. So we need to make this bulletproof. And the way we do that is by spreading it out over various clouds. Another thing is, let's not get too stuck up with doing everything yourself. So we don't want to build around a wheel, and we don't want to invent a better mousetrap. So wherever we can, we are taking partners in. So for example, all of the payment services we don't do ourselves. While they are critical in the sense that we want our money at the end of the month, there's always, if they aren't around at the moment, I can still optimistically sign up and I'll be okay. But if something like, let's say, our playback DRM and concurrency is missing, that's bad because then you can't watch. Which means that we operate all the live production metadata and we operate all the website and apps and the glue code in the middle. But everywhere else, we try to find good partners. But on the critical paths, we usually have an implementation of our own. So there is playback and DRM. We have an implementation of our own. Operational monitoring, we are in there as well. Personalization and search, while it's not critical, we think we can do a better job than the partners there. We do that as well. So what else is going to happen? Big things. I think OTT overtaking linear is a given. I don't think that anybody in this room would say that 10 years from now, people will be sitting there with a terrestrial antenna and be watching television. It's not going to happen anymore. That is going to be driven by to the home and 5G. There's ubiquitous data. There's huge connectivity. This is also allowing things like augmented reality, mixed reality, a big thing for us, which we are working on. This peer-to-peer streaming, getting away from the CDN, getting the bottleneck of the CDN sorted. That's, again, probably our biggest technical problem at the moment, and something which, in classical CDN speaking, classical approach, you can't resolve. If you have audiences of 100 million people, you're not going to do that with the internet as it stands. The only way to do that is by decentralizing as much as you can and taking it down to the user so that the users distribute the content. Working with that. Latency, again, an important one for us. We have it down to 3 seconds by now. That's actually sort of a double-edged sword because we like latency to a degree. It allows us to do services. If I know that I have 15 seconds between an event happening in the ground and actually being visible at the customer, I can do all kinds of weird and wonderful things. I can do a red zone. Does anybody know what a red zone is? Personal conference. I can warn you that a goal has happened in another game. Switch over. I can go out and sort of pull the crowd together. I can say, these are all your friends, and I use the latency to link it up so that you watch it at the same time as your friends. All kinds of things which are interesting, which we are going to do, which are hinging on latency, and CDN I already mentioned. So that's it from my end.